My daughter sold the house I built with my own hands while I was still living in it. And what I did after, no one saw coming. And the last thing I said that night will leave you speechless. The sign was bright red. Sold. I thought it was a mistake. For a moment, I just stood there, my toolbox still in hand, the smell of machine oil clinging to my shirt. The sun was dipping low, painting the porch in amber light. The same porch I built 28 years ago with nothing but a hammer, a blueprint, and a promise. Now it had a plastic sign stabbed into the lawn like a knife. A woman in a navy blazer came down the front steps, smiling like she'd just delivered good news. "Congratulations, Mr. Brooks," she said, shaking my hand. "The sale went through faster than we expected. I'll send over the final papers tomorrow." I stared at her, my mouth dry. "What sale?" She blinked, confused. "The house sale, of course. Your daughter said you'd already moved out." My heart stopped. The air around me felt thin, hollow. "She what?" Before she could answer, I heard a car door slam behind me. Emma. She walked up the driveway, her phone still in her hand, her smile fading when she saw my face. "Dad," she started softly. "Please don't freak out. It was just paperwork. You'll understand soon." "Paperwork?" I repeated. My voice didn't sound like mine. "You sold my house?" Her eyes darted to the realtor, then back to me. "Our house, Dad. You barely stay here anymore. You said you wanted to downsize." "I said I wanted peace," I snapped, "not eviction." She sighed, exasperated like I was the problem. "Dad, it's complicated." "Stop saying that." I cut her off. "You sold the house I built. Every nail in these walls has your mother's name on it. You think that's paperwork?" She looked down, guilty but stubborn. "The money's for the wedding. You'll get your share." I almost laughed. My share? Like this was a business deal. The realtor shifted awkwardly, clutching her clipboard. I'll give you two a moment." She hurried to her car and drove off, leaving silence in her wake. I turned back to Emma. She was biting her lip, refusing to meet my eyes. "Your mother's ashes are in that wall," I said quietly. "The one behind the staircase. Did you even remember that?" Her voice cracked. "I'll move them before we hand over the keys." "You already handed them over." She winced, her composure slipping. "Dad, please, it's just a house. We can build new memories." "No," I said. "You can buy new furniture. You can build fake smiles. But you can't build this again." I stepped past her and opened the front door. The smell hit me first. Sawdust, coffee, the faint trace of her mother's perfume still lingering on the old wood beams. The hallway looked smaller somehow. Empty, stripped. Boxes lined the wall. My life, packed neatly and labeled for shipping. In the kitchen, the morning sunlight used to spill through the window and land right on the chair where my wife used to sit. I used to tell Emma that her mother's warmth lived in that light. Now it was dark. Emma followed me inside, her voice trembling. "Dad, please, don't look at me like that." I turned slowly. "Like what?" "Like I ruined everything." I stared at her for a long time. Then I walked to the mantel where a single framed photo still stood. Me, her, and her mother. The day we finished building the house. All smiles, all hope. I picked it up. The glass cracked under my thumb. "You didn't ruin everything," I said softly. "You sold it." Her breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes, but I'd seen too many apologies fade into excuses. I walked past her out the front door and sat down on the old porch steps. The wood groaned beneath me, the same boards I'd laid, the week she was born. My hands trembled as I brushed the dust away. The sold sign flapped in the wind. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Behind me, I could hear her crying, calling my name. I didn't answer, because there are moments when words don't matter, when silence speaks louder than anger. I looked out at the horizon, the town I'd built my life in, the family I thought I'd raised right, and whispered to the empty yard, it wasn't a house, it was a lifetime. The light faded. The wind carried her voice away, and as the sky turned dark, I realized something colder than grief. They didn't just sell my home, they sold me. I built that house after her mother died. Every nail held a memory, every wall carried a promise, and the last thing she did inside those walls will leave you speechless. The year her mother died, I stopped sleeping. Grief has a way of turning nights into blueprints. You stare at empty walls and start imagining what you could build to fill the silence. That's how the house began. It wasn't just wood and concrete. It was an act of defiance, a way to prove to the universe that something good could still stand after everything else had fallen. I was 34, a young architect with shaking hands, and a daughter who had stopped talking after the funeral. Emma was 9. She used to sit on the ground near my drafting table, coloring quietly while I drew the first sketches of what would become our home. When I asked her what she wanted her room to look like, she said, "Can it have windows that smile?" I laughed. "You mean big windows?" "No," she said. "Windows that make the light happy." So I built it that way. The front of the house faced east so the morning sun would pour into her room before school. Every beam of light touched her drawings pinned to the wall. When she smiled again for the first time after her mother's death, I told myself, this is what healing looks like. We built together, literally. I let her hold the hammer. Her tiny hands struggled with the weight, but she was determined. I can still see the first nail she ever drove in, crooked and half bent, right under the staircase. I never fixed it. That mistake made the house human. She helped me paint the walls. We got more blue on our clothes than the plaster. Her laughter filled the air, soft and high like a song we both needed to hear. When the last coat dried, she ran her fingers along the wood post by the kitchen and whispered, "Dad, this house feels alive." I smiled and said, "It's alive because we built it." The day we moved in, I carved our initials into one of the beams by the porch, E+D. She pressed her little palm over it, leaving a faint print. That mark stayed there for 20 years. Back then, I used to tell her the same thing every night before bed. A home isn't about money, it's about memory. She'd roll her eyes and say, "You always say that." And I'd reply, "Because one day you'll forget, and I want you to remember before you do." She promised she would. Children always promise. When Emma turned 16, she started bringing friends over. I'd watch from the kitchen as they sprawled across the living room floor, laughing, eating pizza, blasting music. One day, I heard her tell a friend, "My dad built this house after Mom died. He says it's made of love, not bricks." That one sentence stayed with me for years. I thought I'd done something right. By the time she went to college, the house had become our anchor. She called it home, no matter where she was. She'd bring boyfriends over for holidays, and I'd sit quietly, pretending not to measure their character from across the table. When she met Ethan, the man she'd later marry, I tried to be polite. He was polished, too polished. The kind of man who said sir just enough to sound respectful but never meant it. He told me he admired the architecture of the place, like it was some model in a magazine. I remember smiling tightly and thinking, this isn't architecture. This is blood and bone. The night she told me she wanted to use the house for something special, I didn't understand. She said, Dad, I've always dreamed of a wedding that means something. I told her, then have it here. This is where meaning lives. She laughed, hugged me, and said, You're the best, Dad. I didn't know those words would be the beginning of an ending. Months later, that same laughter would echo differently. Thinner, practiced, guilty, and that something special she dreamed of. It turned out to be selling the only piece of her mother I had left. After the realtor left that day, I walked through the empty rooms. Every sound carried differently, hollow, wrong. The boards creaked under my feet like they were whispering goodbye. In the living room, I could still see faint scratches from her toy car on the floorboards. In the hallway, the wall where she once measured her height was still marked with pencil lines. Emma, age 12, 14, 18. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was cold. I closed my eyes, and in the silence I heard it. The echo of a hammer. My hammer. Her laughter. The ghost of who we were. I built that house after her mother died. Every nail held a memory. Every wall carried a promise. I opened my eyes to the emptiness and whispered, I never knew she'd trade our memories for a wedding invitation list. Outside, the sold sign caught the evening light. Inside, all that was left was dust, and the sound of my heartbeat, hammering against a lifetime undone. They called it paperwork. I called it betrayal. And the final signature I found on that contract will leave you speechless. I used to believe that betrayal came with shouting, slammed doors, angry tears, maybe a confession. I never imagined it would come in the form of a neat envelope marked for review and signature. It arrived one Thursday morning. Emma and Ethan stopped by together, smiling too much, speaking too carefully, the kind of smiles that hide something sharp underneath. Dad, Emma began, we need your help. Just a little favor. I raised an eyebrow. You sound like you're selling something. She laughed nervously. No, it's just paperwork for the bank. We need to show proof of collateral to qualify for the wedding loan. Temporary, that's all. Nothing changes ownership. Ethan slid the papers across the table like a magician showing a deck of cards. You're still the owner, he said, tapping the page. The bank just needs assurance, standard procedure. I didn't read it carefully. That's the cruelest truth of all. I trusted my daughter more than I trusted my own instincts. So I signed. Black ink, my name, my faith. When they left, she kissed my cheek and said, You'll always be part of this, Dad. She was right. I just didn't know how. 3 weeks later, the phone call came. Mr. Brooks, this is First Western Bank. We need to confirm the release of funds from the sale of your property. Sale. The word froze me mid-breath. There must be a mistake, I said slowly. I didn't sell anything. The banker hesitated. Sir, your daughter and her fiancé finalized the transaction. You signed the authorization papers yourself. The funds were wired 2 days ago. My hand tightened on the receiver. The walls around me seemed to tilt. I could hear my pulse louder than his voice. I want to see those papers, I said. When I arrived at the bank, the manager greeted me with professional pity. He slid the file across the desk, pointing at the bottom of the page. There it was, my signature, perfectly mine, and beneath it the final statement. Property sold in full to the Sterling Group. It was my hand on the paper, I whispered, but their greed guiding it. I left the bank and drove without seeing the road. By the time I reached their apartment, my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel to keep from falling apart. Ethan opened the door, wearing that same smug half-smile. "Mr. Brooks, you should have called. Where's my daughter?" Emma appeared behind him, pale, nervous. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. She swallowed hard. "We were going to. We just needed to move fast. The market was good. We thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" I snapped. "That you sold my house to pay for your wedding? The house your mother died in?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, please don't make it sound like that." "Then how should I make it sound?" Ethan stepped in, voice smooth and practiced. "Sir, we'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll still have a place to stay. We can help you move into something smaller." I turned to him, every word trembling with fury. "You'll help me move? Out of the home I built for my wife? The one I raised her daughter in? You think you can help me?" He stiffened but didn't speak. Emma looked at me, desperate. "It's just a house, Dad. You wouldn't have used it anyway." I froze. The words hung in the air like poison. I took a slow step toward her. "I used that house to remember your mother," I said quietly. "But I guess you sold her too?" Her tears finally fell. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about not making things worse. But it was already worse. That night, I went back to the empty house. One last time. The new owners hadn't moved in yet. The door creaked as I stepped inside. The air smelled different, cleaner, emptier, like it already belonged to someone else. I walked to the beam near the kitchen, the one with our initials carved into it. E+D. The letters were faded, the grooves filled with dust. I brushed my fingers over them, then clenched my fist. The wood cracked under the first hit. Splinters flew. By the third hit, the carving shattered, falling to the floor in a cloud of sawdust. I stared at the broken beam, breathing hard. The mark we made together was gone, just like everything else. That's when I realized something I'd never forget. Love has a price. I just hadn't realized it was negotiable. They thought I'd beg to be invited. I was already buying the stage they'd stand on, and what I set in motion after that will make you question who really owned the wedding. Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with silence, the kind that hums under your skin until it finds a direction. For weeks, I didn't speak to Emma or Ethan. Not a word. They thought I was broken, too humiliated to fight back. They didn't understand. I was just busy building. One night, out of habit, I found myself scrolling through social media. Their wedding posts were everywhere. "Dream ceremony at the Silver Garden Resort," the caption read. Photos of champagne fountains, chandeliers, marble floors. A paradise for people who mistake luxury for love. But one detail caught my eye. A local news article announcing that the Silver Garden was seeking private investors to offset debt from the pandemic. The headline might as well have been written for me. I started digging. The resort had been losing money for over a year. Unpaid loans, legal issues, tax pressure. It was bleeding quietly behind the glamour, and I had just enough money to make it mine. I went to the bank the next morning, withdrew what was left of my retirement savings, and transferred the compensation I'd received from the house sale, blood money from betrayal. Every dollar they'd stolen would now fund my plan. The resort's representative was a young lawyer, all smiles and empty words. When I walked into his office, he stood to shake my hand. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for your interest. You understand we're offering 49% of the company's equity?" "Yes," I said calmly, "and I'll take it." He blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll take the entire offer. Cash." His professionalism cracked for just a second. "Most investors request due diligence, sir." I smiled faintly. "I've built things my whole life. I don't need to study the blueprints. I know when a foundation's about to collapse and when to buy it cheap." He laughed nervously. "You're quite the risk taker." "No," I said. "I just know value when others don't." 3 signatures later, I became the largest shareholder of the Silver Garden Resort. My name didn't go public. Corporate discretion has its benefits. When the final contract slid across the table, I paused, pen hovering. "It felt poetic," I said softly. "Signing something they couldn't steal this time." The next step was simple. I contacted the resort's operations manager, introduced myself as a silent partner, and requested maintenance to be done the week of the 15th, the wedding date. Specifically, I said, the power systems and water supply, full technical review, no exceptions. He hesitated. "Sir, that's the day of a large wedding event." "I'm aware," I interrupted. "Safety first." A small note of authority can bend any conversation your way. I drafted a legal statement and scheduled its release for the morning of the ceremony. Notice: due to unforeseen legal review and safety maintenance, the Silver Garden Resort will remain temporarily closed until further notice. All scheduled events are postponed. Every word polite, every word lethal. I spent the next few days preparing like I used to before a construction project, methodical, detached. No shouting, no fury, just calculation. I even slept better. The night before the wedding, I drove out to the resort. The place looked like something from a movie. Golden lights shimmering over the lake. Music echoing from rehearsal dinners. Laughter drifted into the cold air, careless and soft. I parked by the hill far enough to watch without being seen. Through the grand windows, I could see Emma dancing with Ethan. She looked radiant, wrapped in white silk, twirling under chandeliers I now technically owned. Every smile, every sparkle of glass, it all belonged to me, and she didn't even know it. I rolled down the window, letting the sound of her laughter drift out into the night. For a second, I almost felt the old ache again, the father's instinct to forgive. But forgiveness is just another form of debt, and I was done paying. I whispered to myself, tomorrow they'll learn what it feels like to lose something you thought you owned. I checked the time. Midnight. From the passenger seat, I pulled out the printed closure notice, signed and sealed with company letterhead. It felt heavy in my hands, heavier than any hammer I'd ever held. I stared at it for a long moment. This was more than revenge. It was symmetry. They'd taken my home for their wedding. Now I'd take their wedding with my home's money. Every nail I drove into that house, every cut on my hand, it all led here. As I sat there, headlights from a passing car swept across the hood, illuminating the resort sign, the Silver Garden. I thought about how ironic the name was. Silver, the color of betrayal, the metal you can melt and reshape but never truly purify. I watched the lights fade, then turned the key in the ignition. The car hummed softly, steady like my pulse. Somewhere behind those walls, they were rehearsing their vows. I promise to cherish you. I promise to protect you. Empty promises, built on the ashes of mine. I drove off, the road glistening under the thin drizzle. As the resort disappeared in my rearview mirror, a strange calm settled over me. People mistake revenge for destruction. But real revenge is creation, building something new from what they thought they ruined. When I reached the city, I stopped at a red light. The reflection of the sold sign from weeks ago flashed across my mind. I smiled. They wanted luxury, I whispered. I gave them reality. They wanted a fairy tale. I wrote them a nightmare. And the ending will shock you. Weddings are supposed to start with laughter, music, and champagne. This one started with a storm. The morning sky above the silver garden hung low and gray, heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. The kind that waits for the perfect moment to break. Guests poured in through the marble gates, umbrellas glinting under flashes of cameras. Local reporters were already setting up near the fountain, ready to broadcast the most extravagant wedding of the year. Emma looked like something out of a magazine. White silk, diamonds, practiced grace. Ethan stood beside her, smug in his designer suit, shaking hands like a politician. They were surrounded by flowers, champagne towers, and a stage that sparkled under the chandelier light. Everything was perfect. Except for what they didn't know. I arrived early. Not as a guest, but as the man who owned the ground they were standing on. No one looked twice at me, just another old man in a raincoat, walking along the path. But the staff knew. The managers had their instructions. Every department head had a sealed envelope in hand marked, to be opened at 11 a.m. sharp. The ceremony was scheduled for 11:15. By 10:45, the resort buzzed with energy. Guests were laughing, the band was warming up, and the MC was practicing his lines on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he rehearsed into the mic, let's welcome the couple who made this day possible, Emma Brooks and Ethan Hale. The sound echoed through the hall like an omen. At 10:59, a young staff member peeked at the clock and tore open his envelope. Inside was a single page. Crisp, white official. By order of the new majority shareholder of the Silver Garden Resort, this property will be closed for legal and safety review effective immediately. All scheduled events are postponed until further notice. He read it twice, his hands trembling. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and went out. The music cut mid-note. The chandeliers dimmed to black. The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by whispers and the shuffle of heels. Is this part of the show? Someone laughed nervously. Ethan barked at a waiter. Get the lights back on. The staff scrambled. The emergency lamps flickered, then died again. Only the faint glow from the windows painted the room in dull gray. Then a manager, pale, sweating, approached the stage. He handed Ethan a folded letter with trembling fingers. Ethan snatched it open. As he read, the blood drained from his face. Emma stepped closer. What is it? He didn't answer. His hand shook so violently the paper rustled like dry leaves. She grabbed it and read for herself. Her bouquet hit the floor. Gasps rippled through the guests. People started pulling out phones, filming. And that was when I stepped forward. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. The crowd parted, instinctively, as if the air itself recognized something dangerous walking through it. My coat dripped with rain. My shoes echoed against the marble floor, one step, then another, slow, deliberate. Ethan saw me first. You, he spat. What the hell is this? I stopped at the bottom of the steps. This, I said quietly, is ownership. Emma turned toward me. Her eyes widened, not with anger, but with realization. Dad, what did you do? I looked at her calm as stone. You sold my house to build this dream, I said. I just bought your dream to remind you how easily things disappear. A murmur swept through the hall. Some guests gasped. Others whispered. The photographers didn't stop shooting. The clicks of their cameras sounded like gunfire. Ethan tried to keep his composure, but his voice cracked. You can't just, this is our wedding. No, I said. This was your performance. It's over. The MC tried to intervene, mumbling something about sorting it out later. I turned to him. The venue is closed. You can leave now. He did. So did half the staff. Emma took a step forward, tears in her eyes. Why, Dad? Why humiliate me like this? I met her gaze. You called it paperwork. I called it betrayal. This is balance. Her lip trembled. I was trying to start my life. And you started it by selling mine. She shook her head, crying harder now. You could have just said no. I smiled faintly, and you could have just asked permission. The hall erupted in chaos, guests arguing, cameras flashing, reporters whispering into microphones. But in the middle of it all, there was a strange stillness between us. Father and daughter, facing each other across the wreckage of what used to be love. Ethan slammed his fist on a table. This is insane. We'll sue you. You'll try, I said, but since your contract was with my company, you'll be suing your own investor. He froze. For the first time, the charm drained from his face completely. The silence that followed was deafening. I took one last look at Emma. Her dress perfect, her dream collapsing. There was no victory in it, just truth. I turned and walked toward the doors. Behind me, voices rose, phones rang, and the first drops of rain began to fall against the windows. The heavy doors closed behind me with a low, final thud. Outside, the rain came harder, drenching the steps, washing the makeup from the day's lie. I stood at the gate and watched the staff hang a new sign across the entrance. Closed. Until further notice. The letters glistened under the storm. I lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years. The smoke curled upward, soft against the rain. Through the downpour, I could still hear echoes of the commotion inside. Shouts, sobs, confusion. But they grew fainter with each breath. Because revenge doesn't rebuild what's lost. It doesn't fix the cracks or heal the wounds. It just makes sure the ones who broke you never sleep peacefully again. The rain blurred everything into silver, the sign, the pavement, the memory of what once was. And as I walked away, the thunder rolled behind me, soft and distant, like applause, for a man who'd finally learned that justice doesn't need to be loud to be heard.